Hi there. I'm Mark. Pleased to meet you all today. It's good to see so many of you have already called in. So we've got people from Ireland, the US, South Africa, and London. I'm Mark. I'm from Cheltenham, which is about an hour and a half west of London. It's raining. It'd be very nice to know what the weather's like where you are, as well as whether you saw the coronation this morning or not. I still don't know what to make of it, but it was quite enjoyable. Okay, so we'll get straight on with it. I'm really glad you're here for classroom management, because it's one of those seminars that's obviously based not on you getting through your assignments here, but actually on the nitty-gritty of actual teaching. So from that point of view, I think it's a really interesting one to do. Sorry, Michael, I don't understand your question. Do I need to be in a place where I can talk with QA? Sorry, I'm not sure what to make of that. You have to tell me what QA is. Very obvious, I'm sure, but I'm not sure I've got it here. Okay, so just a little bit about me for 10 seconds. I've been teaching for 32 years now. About the second half of that, I've been in teaching management and doing a lot of teacher training, obviously, and working with teachers, but also staying back in the classroom occasionally. Now I work from home most of the time, but I do occasionally go into my local school for my sins to remind myself of what it can be like at times. And I also work for the MOD here quite a lot, since their academy is kind of down the road from me. So that's me. Let's get straight on with this then. I'll go straight into the slides now. So first one, can you all see that okay, or do I need to make it bigger? Does that look better if it's like that? If somebody please says yes, that's fine. That'll be great. Classroom management. I don't know how many of you have taught before and whether you've taught TEFL or not, but yes, as it says here, it can certainly be extremely daunting. Not just to teachers who are new to the classroom as well. I think thinking in advance about how you're going to deal with behaviour issues can also seem quite intimidating. I think one point that's probably worth nipping in the bud from the start is the idea that teenage classes seem to be are felt to be the biggest problem. Certainly not necessarily the case. Any class can be a problem, and classes of teenagers can be absolutely brilliant. The key is, of course, you and your preparation and the thought that goes into what you want to achieve. You'll notice, I think in particular, in assignment 2 that you do, and among the things that you have to fill in is those classroom aims and objectives. And it's not until you start teaching you realize just how important those are to define the horizon, the way that you're going to head towards it, what you want to do with it, and even within a lesson, keep plotting your path towards it. So we're now going to look quickly at what the groups actually mean, between, first of all, the very young learners. Think about the obvious things with those. It's likely that they're not going to know the language well. They're not going to know their own language particularly well either. And they're also, very importantly, going to have very limited experience of being in the classroom. One of the great things for them is you keep the activities very, very short, just a couple of minutes, activities that involve lots of repetition. Material has to be visual, videos, songs, and it's very likely, of course, that there won't be any reading or writing at this age, because there'll be very little in their own language anyway. Going on to young learners, what we define as young learners, 6 to 11, 6 to 12 years old. They typically have experience of being in class and will have some English skills. And in fact, by the time they're 11, they could, on occasion, have high levels of English. Unlike when I were a lad, they also have such an exposure to English as well, because they can just get it anytime they want. And that means they can pursue their own interests, particularly, obviously, with music, but others as well, film, movie, culture, all sorts of things that they can pursue that we don't see in the classroom, but they nevertheless get the benefit from them. They also, very importantly, have very different interests from a 4 to 5-year-old. Something else that I often see is materials that are submitted for a youngish class that are actually really, really suitable for a very young class. If you got Binky the glove puppet saying yes and no and pointing at dog and cat, they're just going to be too cool for that. You've really got to be careful with what you choose for them. Going on from that, teenager classes. We normally think of teenagers 12, 13 to 16. As with younger learners, a wide range of abilities, can be from beginners to advanced, but normally your school should winnow that out so you're in a narrower band, of course. They're able to focus on tasks for longer. They've got more complex ideas, more complex tasks that they can manage. The lessons still need to be engaging and they need to be varied. And very importantly, they tend to be more self-conscious as well. And that can sometimes bring a real barrier across what they want to discuss and the things that nobody wants to stick their head up and say anything out of order. So that can be a very strong demotivator for them as well. So you need to be careful with that one. Adults, I think we can all guess what that means. Over the age of 16 or 18, it will depend on what your school's ideas are for this, depending on the institution. And they can have the most vast range between false beginners to advanced, and the differences for the different reasons for learning, being intrinsic, extrinsic, personal study, work, all sorts. So the variety there is wonderful. The great thing that they think that they have there is the need to see things written down and the need to be more confident that they are correct before they come out with things. They're not happy to say something that's half correct a lot of the time and think that's good enough. It's a great obstacle sometimes for learning, is this need for perfection before expressing themselves, and something you would hope, and what we call, of course, an effective barrier, something that we would always hope that we can try to break down as we go. The more that you know a class, the more that the class is familiar with each other, the more that they know that you're not going to judge them, things like that. Okay, so before teaching, you will probably have your own ideas about this. Try, if you can, not to have any preconceived ideas, especially when you're an inexperienced teacher. And I like that. I like this second bullet point. Decide what you want to happen in your classroom. Is such a nice way of looking at what you want. It can even, I think, vary between task and task as well. Maybe I'm jumping ahead. I'll come back to that. But above all else, what you want to happen, what behavior you will accept in order to have that happen, and then above all else, to stick to that. Don't just think about the rules, think about the activities, the tasks you're going to give them that will engage them and will keep them working rather than messing about. That's such a great thing always to think about. If you go into pretty much any staff room, you'll hear teachers, and some of you have probably had this less than wonderful experience, you'll hear teachers talking about how terrible their students are. And I probably 20 years ago, I may possibly have been one of those people as well. As you get more experienced, and you have a look and think, what are you doing in there? What can you do about this as well? And so very much as a teacher, and if you have the teaching mentality, you very much look at yourself rather than looking just at what the students are, you think, doing wrong. And a great way of approaching this is to take the bull by the horns, get it started from the first lesson. The assumption here is that you're going to have a more or less constant class for a week, or maybe a constant class for one day a week over some time. So what kind of rules can you think of to that you think would be a good idea? I'm I'm very happy for you to put some rules up that you either use or think would be a good idea. Thank you. Like dog training, not bad dogs, bad owners. Yes, and teachers, like dog owners, never actually say to themselves, look, I'm a really, really bad teacher. I really need to improve my skills. It doesn't work that way, but we have that capacity to reflect upon ourselves all the same. So to go back to my point, one thing we can do to meet it head on is to think about rules. Now, I've got a list of rules that will come up in the next slide. Once I put those up, I'm very happy for you to add some other rules as well, and maybe at the end we can have a quick chat about them, see what we think. There are a few things that we probably need to think about as well within this one, which is, yeah, thank you, telephone rules. Anything to do with mobiles is a big one, and again, one that has crept up on us over the last couple of decades, or wasn't an issue when I started teaching, which makes me sound like something of a fossil, but there you go. Okay, so I'm just going to jump on now and have a look at some rules here, and you can sort of just see what you like. Some teachers also like the idea, I'm not saying I do so much, of rules for teachers as well. So a contract that you undertake yourself. I don't agree with that personally, but purely personally doesn't mean that you shouldn't. On the other hand, I think the idea that it brings in, which is the idea that we're looking at cooperation, that I'm not just telling you what to do, but we're all in this together. This is a cooperative enterprise, not me being the boss looking down on you pupils, is a great one to follow through with, because it's absolutely the way that you need to be. And if people feel themselves to be part of an equal group with an equal task, all going in the same direction, your discipline problems will disappear very quickly, simply because people aren't messing the teacher about anymore, because that's kind of fun and that can be a bit naughty. They're mucking everybody else about as well. If everybody's there, then the people who might stick out, who might do something, won't do it any longer. Okay, so I've given you a quick idea of those. Like I say, if anybody else wants to put anything up there, we can look at those ones as well. The only one I'd say, quite a big one here, is if we look at number 4, not bully or laugh at anybody. The temptation as a teacher to do that can be considerable. And of course, what is for you delightful humor might really come across the other way. And it's one that you need to be very, very careful about. Some teachers stumble into this. Some teachers are instinctively away. I used to be somebody who could stumble into doing something like that very, very, very easily. And so I really had to watch myself. Others, you may be more disciplined than me in the first place. Okay, so one of the things that we can look at here, I think, is the idea of consistency. And this is a great one for reflection as well. Sometimes it can be, you can be unhappy about somebody and it's not actually them that's done the thing wrong, or they've done it, but everybody else has been doing it in the first place. And people really, really, especially teenagers, really will pick up on this if they will understand very clearly if you are being unfair. Or sorry, they will understand very much if you are being fair, but if you are not, and if they think you are not, they will let you know. And this will lead to a bigger conflict. And this feeds back into something that somebody might point something out about this, and you might think, you know what, you're right. And I think this is a really, really big point, is if somebody says something like that, and you go, actually, yeah, you're right. Even if it's in the next lesson, say sorry. Such a big thing to do. Some teachers can be too taken up with, frankly, their own pomposity, their own importance, whatever else it may be, or not thinking about losing face. You lose a lot more face if you try to stick to a losing wicket than if you actually say, you know what, you're quite right, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have reacted like that. It's such a great thing to do. And surprise, surprise, you find that people behave much, much better with it. It's not weakness. Weakness is trying to hold on to your dignity when, you know, when there are more important things at play, and fairness trumps dignity every time, I would say. Okay. Part of that, of course, is remaining consistent with the rules that you have made. And again, the saying sorry comes from, if you think you've departed from that, then you need to be the one who's pointing it out about. Really use positive reinforcement. I know it's an obvious thing to say, but it's so important to do. You know, don't shout at bad behavior. Thank people for good behavior, and don't get involved in the bad behavior. That's something else I think that maybe comes a little bit later as well. But I would say not getting involved, not getting dragged down with it in any way. So thanking people for the good stuff, and really smiling and helping them on with that. Don't spend time on discipline. Make maybe the hour or so you've got with me as long as you ever spend on discipline. And from that, I mean that if somebody is creating a problem, think about the gradations of ways, we'll probably talk about this at the end, that you can deal with that. But what you don't do is bring the whole class grinding to a halt while you tell that individual or those two individuals what they've done wrong and what they should be doing right. In many cases, of course, that's exactly the result that they want. You want to be able to deal with things quickly, move straight on. Don't let individuals slow down and disrupt the class for, you know, the other 15, 20 people, however many are in there. Once you've made the rules, you stick with them. You have clarity with them, and you try not to back down from them. Like I say, if they're fair rules in the first place and everybody's been made fully aware of them, there's no reason why you should. I think a little bit of routine as well, in terms of clear ways to start and end a class. Now, this could be doing the register at the start of the class and checking homework, and then getting students to pack away at the end and leaving when you tell them to, not letting people pile on out. And another one that's, I think, quite important within that as well is also make sure the classroom is tidy. So easy for them to go dashing out and leave the whole place a pigsty, which is then either yours or the next teacher's responsibility to clear up. I think that little bit of no, stop, 30 seconds, make sure your desk is clear, make sure there's nothing on the floor, is a really nice thing to do. And again, that idea of that respect for the class as well, and the class and the learning space is also really important. Now, I'm going to go on. I'll jump onto the next slide here. How am I doing for time, by the way? I had a little stopwatch that was coming on, and I forgot to turn it on, of course, never mind. Right, just a couple of things here. Somebody's mentioned a transcript. Now, this will all be on YouTube, so of course the slides will be on YouTube as well. I'm assuming that you get information on how you can get to that very straight after the lesson. Okay, so this is a great one, I think. Don't make threats that you can't or won't carry out. This comes back to, I think, a really important point, which is that sometimes these things do seem worrying. And one of the reasons that you don't have to worry too much is that you do have a higher authority. A couple of things should happen, of course. When you go to a school, you should be given a teacher induction pack, and that will tell you what the rules are, many of which will go into your rules that you can then, that you are then applying on behalf of the school. It will also tell you what you can't do. This can be very different. I'll give you an example. I work at the MOD, and I work with senior officers, and they all have to turn up in their uniforms, and they utterly shame me because I sort of schlep in looking like a less than immaculate, and they're all there in their perfect uniforms. They're all there well before the lesson. The classroom is immaculate, all fantastic. On the other hand, I then go and sometimes, as I said, work at my local school, just really to sort of keep my hand in with a bit of teaching. And there, people rock up half an hour late, clutching a croissant and clutching a croissant and a coffee. And the school rules are I can't do anything about it because they are paying customers, and the customer is always right. So long as you're aware of these two things, you're absolutely fine. There's nothing that you can do about it, so just relax about it. Not your problem. And the other thing, of course, is make sure that your lessons are good enough that they want to be there on time, coffee or not. Humiliation, I've sort of pointed that one out. Sometimes what you think is your own delightful humor can actually be unpleasant, especially with the younger classes. Really keep your eyes open for that. Between, you know, you're all teachers, you've all got that awareness. So that's correct. Ministry of Defence UK. Sorry, MOD. Yes, the MOD, Ministry of Defence. Sorry, yes, I should have made that one clear. And then we can also talk here about, as I said, speaking to the student. This is kind of like the graded response. Sorry, I've got myself a bit out of sync here. But yes, when I said to you in the last slide about not making a big thing of things, one of the best ways about that one is just a quiet word at the end. You get students on their own, they're obviously a lot more amenable than when they're with their group as well. So if you can have a quiet word, and again, it's one of those ways of having that equals conversation where you can say, look, this is what happens, you know, this is how I feel when you do this. I really don't want you to do that. And you can just eliminate so many things very quickly, very quietly. Okay. I've mentioned as well about admitting mistakes. Such a good thing to do. It gets you respect. It does not lose you respect. You do not lose face by doing this. We're not politicians, we're teachers. Okay, I will jump on. This is something that I think we're very lucky in the job that we do here. We have a job where we can enjoy what we do. We can have great lessons. And then at the end of it, it's largely out of your mind. And I say that because I have a great many friends who work in state schools teaching, and they take their jobs home with them very much. They have difficulties that you can't just park at the door. We're very lucky. We can do that. We can largely do a job that we really enjoy and then get on with our lives outside of it as well. That's a wonderful thing about this job. It does not mean that we can stop reflecting on what we do, and everybody does this. Now you can either note it down if you want, you can write things down afterwards and say, okay, what happened, what went well, what didn't go well. As you get more experience, that reflection tends to be more mental than written, but it's still a great thing to do. And again, it will help in the future as well. Activities that were successful, why were they successful? Why did everybody sort of just pile on? Why did everybody lose themselves in this one? And of course, more importantly, why didn't they go as planned? And what little part of it? Maybe they're actually great. 7 out of 10, 7 parts out of 10 of it was fantastic, but there's one little detail that didn't quite work. What was it? I say personally, the biggest single one is your own instructions. I would say that's probably the biggest single thing as a newish teacher, and sometimes not so new, that can go wrong, is you come out with something and you know what, you haven't really made that clear, and so people are doing slightly different things, and then it takes them all a little while, and then they go into their own first languages to try to clarify between themselves, and you've lost the momentum of the class. So I'd say instructions would be the biggest single thing about this. You could work out. There can be other things as well, other reasons that things didn't go well. Tasks being too complicated, may not have been age appropriate, was something unusual for that particular class, or even, very importantly, sometimes for a particular student, sometimes somebody who can be incredibly amenable but is not giving you back the right responses on a given day. Do you need to have a quiet word with them? Maybe they'll just be fine the next day. All sorts of different things, and of course also reflecting on how you dealt with any issues as well. That's also part of reflection. Don't let irritation blind you to the fact that you may have dealt with that you may have been able to deal with something better at some point. And of course, from that reflection about what you did wrong comes up to, and I'll join up to another slide with this one, comes to the future responses as well. How would you change that? What would you change? What would you do differently? And I think in particular that, as we said, there aren't any bad dogs. There are bad owners, whoever that was, but thank you for it. A great analogy. So you think about yourself, you think about the activities, you think about the tasks, you think about your behavior, you think about your reaction to your students. And above all else with this, just keeping you cool. Again, that goes to what I mentioned about don't give too much to anybody. Don't give too much attention to any bad behavior. Deal with it quickly, move on. Don't let them come out. Okay, that's a great question about the phone. Okay, if we deal with that one at the end, because we are drawing towards the end here. Anyway, just let me go on to the next slide. The biggest single one, as I said to you at the start, you've got a class, you've got a school, you've got a director of studies, you've got senior teachers. You can ask all of those people, and I would frankly ask all of those people. I would ask the senior person first of all, because they know what the rules are, which is the first real port of call that you've got in terms of what what your rights are for this. And then senior teachers, other teachers who may have experienced things, or who may have also experienced those individuals as well. They might actually be able to shed some light on why an individual is being difficult for a particular reason or something like that, or similar situations that they've had with them. All sorts of ways that you could do with something like that. Okay, let me just jump on. Oh, there you go. Now, before we finish, I also have a SurveyMonkey that I'm going to drop into the comments. In fact, I may just pop it in now. It is not for now, it is for later. But if I do it now, then should I forget it later, we are covered. So I'm going to ask now for any of your questions. There was a couple of bits and bobs that I wanted to add while we were saying this, most of which, of course, I have now forgotten. That being the case, I'm going to come up with that first wonderful question from Josh about wondering if you can take someone's phone if you give them 3 strikes and put it in 3 strikes and their phone is out. One, I would say I would proceed. It's an excellent idea, but personally, I would proceed with caution on that, unless you have maybe cleared it with somebody senior first. And I think the reason for that is largely the kind of the physical aspect of it. Just think about putting your hand out. You put your hand out and say, "Give me the phone." What happens if they don't give you the phone then? You can't physically intervene on a student. So you either have the point there of backing off or losing face, and losing face in the kind of physical way, which is not the way that you want to do it. So I would say it's a difficult one. But then again, the school should have firm ideas about this as well. You shouldn't really be in a school that says let them use their phones, let them take a call. Or the wonderful one that you sometimes have from students, which is "It's my mum," which I not being a mum myself, I sort of wonder what that one kind of qualification that means for it. They might need their phone to record their pronunciation. That's an extremely diligent student. If you did have a student who wanted to do that, then I think that they would, I would say that almost certainly they would ask if they could do it in advance. I think that would almost certainly be the case. If you had somebody who was really interested in that way, then I think that would be wonderful. What do you do if students simply will not settle down and listen? Got the 3 to stop running around. Oh, yeah. At this point, you kind of how far do you escalate this before you're not sure what you can do? I think with a substitute, in a situation like that, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's almost like you've got nothing left but a nuclear response, and that's the last thing that you ever need to do. So I would say if there is the very, very final thing that you could possibly do would be saying to everybody, I'm sorry, if you simply refuse to do anything that I request you to do, then I have to leave the classroom and I have to come and get a senior person in because you're not giving me anything else to do. I think with experience, you'd hope that you're never going to get to that, and you'd make sure you'd never got to that by having various by having the activities, etc., that are going to really involve you in that, involve them in the class instead. But yeah, I have to say, I don't think I've ever been in a classroom where simply nobody has taken, or a certain number of people have simply refused your authority outright. So maybe you're talking about a state school rather than a language school. There, is it Emma or M? Anyway, but it's not going to happen very often, shall we say that? Okay, the ideal punishment for a student who disturbs the class with talking to the other students. I have to take issue with you there about the word punishment. As I said before, largely we're talking about paying customers, or their parents are paying. And so the word punishment really doesn't come into this. I think this. I'm gonna. Hopefully, I can deal with another couple with this as well. I would say really, let's just talk about maybe the graded response to this. So first of all, if you're in a classroom and people are talking, of course, that means there's two people in a group. They're together talking. So about the first thing you can do is just move over to them, stand there. So you're still maybe talking to the class, stand right in front of them, stand in their territory. You don't need to say anything. You're just there. You're there in their territory and you're talking. 9 times out of 10, that will get the idea that's, hang on, I shouldn't be doing this. After that, I would say the second one is, sorry, so-and-so, bit of quiet, please, over there, something with a smile, and that's done. I'd say you would say that a second time, and then by the third time, you're saying, either I need to have a word. You could either take them outside very quickly, or depending at the time in the lesson, you can have a quick word with them at the end of the lesson. Just hold them back for a minute, and hold them, and just say, this is what's happening. And again, when you do that, do not stand on your dignity. It's not, this is what the school says, you shouldn't be doing this. It is far more, I think, an idea of, look, guys, this is, I'm trying to do this and you're stopping me from doing this. What's stopping me from doing this is what you're doing. This is what you're doing. This is why it stops me. So we need this not to happen from now on. Does it ever work to ask the students? So I believe I should show these. I think, yes, that would be a better idea. So does it ever work to ask the student what they think you should do? I have to say that's a situation that I think it's giving too much time to the student. Personally, I think it's giving too much time to the student and to a behavioural problem, and the whole idea of what we're talking about is nipping things off at the bud rather than having to get involved in a big way, and the disruption that causes, which is just as big as the disruption that comes from their behaviour in the first place and can sometimes be worse. So I would say, it's not one I've tried. You're very welcome to try, and it would depend on circumstances, I think, as to whether you could do that. So Fran, I'm going to take your question here. In general, I would say that if people are paying customers, it's actually better for the teachers, not worse. And the reason for that is if they're kids, mum and dad are paying, and so they have responsibility to mum and dad. And if they're adults, they're paying because they darn well want to be there and they want to learn something. And if you have a choice between people who are going to demand to learn something or people who aren't bothered, let's go for the ones who really, really want to learn something, and the onus is on you to really work up to deliver lessons that are good enough to really give them what they want. That is by far the best way of doing things. So I would say here that the lessons in general are better, and every now and then, yes, you get the coffee and the croissant half an hour late, but again, that is not your problem. And I think it's one of the important things actually about this, is to think that a lot of things you reflect on, you do what you can, you carry on improving as long as you teach. If you ever think you don't need to carry on improving as a teacher, there's really there's not really much point in you being a teacher. The great thing about teaching is you never get perfect at it, and you can always improve, but you have that constant need for improvement, along with the enormous satisfaction of the job that you do and the happy people that you get, and the people whose lives you can facilitate, and the careers that you can help, all the other things that go on there that are so wonderful about it as well. This is such a big question, Ranshi, that I'm not sure that I can I'm not sure how much I can deal with it. If I have no experience in teaching and I opt for A1, A2 students, I think we'd need to know what age they are. I think we've sort of dealt a little bit with the age levels here, but I would say certainly if you're teaching at the start, often actually the easiest levels to teach are intermediate. You probably know the grammar, or the grammar is comparatively easy to learn for a specific time, and yet you can communicate with them, so they can make needs known, they can make wants, they can make difficulties understood as well. So if you've got issues, you've got the level, they've got the level where you can clarify things. So that can often be the best ones. Just, I think, though, if you have no experience, don't let anything that I say worry you too much. Obviously, that's not the point of a classroom management lesson, is to sort of concern you about these things when it doesn't happen most of the time. My ideas here, therefore, are, like I say, keep things as small as they possibly can, and then they never become big in the first place. You're unlikely to go through an entire glittering teaching career without having some major problem at some point or other, but it will be rare. It'll probably be memorable, but it will be extremely rare. The vast majority of people, either they really want to do the work, and they want to be there, and they want to enjoy themselves, and the greater number of the minority who aren't that bothered about it will still be quite happy to enjoy themselves, because it's more fun enjoying yourself in the lesson than it actually is disrupting it. And so I honestly can think that the only big problems I have had with discipline in 30 years have been people who wanted to move up classes. So in fact, it happened less when I was in the classroom and more when I was in management. And I had people coming up in the last week before they finished classes going, "Me, advanced." And you're going, "No, you elementary." And by going through the process, speaking to the teachers, saying, could they move up a class? And the teacher saying, "No, they can't move up a class. They're no better than anybody else, and they're probably slightly below average." So then you have to explain this to somebody why they can't go up. And then, of course, you realize that there was this extrinsic motivation of getting a better certificate or something like that. If they moved up for a week, they could have a certificate that put them at a higher level than they were, things like that. So in general, with discipline problems, there was something behind it. There was tended to be a reason for it as well. And the other reason I think that you would maybe have problems is because people sorry, I've just been distracted because I've just seen another question here. So I think I'll leave that one. Michael, that's a great question, but it's one that I'm going to leave for the moment. It's not really on this one, but we do have tutor support. There's probably a lot of people you could ask that question for. Okay. Yes, I'd say the only other disciplinary issue that you would really have is people who come from state schools. So often, again, maybe this is where you get the teenager idea. They're already kind of got that idea. They come maybe from a holiday or something like that. They come in and there's already the idea that the teacher is kind of the enemy or something like that, because that's what they're used to in a state school. And they take a little bit of re-educating to understand that, hey, no, you're in a different situation, in a different environment. You can have a great time here. You're not being teacher's pet just by enjoying yourself and by speaking up. And it doesn't take long, because they tend to come into a class where people are actually much more motivated as well. So they're kind of messing about in their own country, in their own school. Doesn't really work when they come to a classroom that's full of unfamiliar people who are much more motivated than they are. And people will tend to go with the greater number. They'll go with the majority there. Okay. I feel there may be questions here that either I haven't answered particularly well, and that you could you might ask a more pointed question too. Not because your questions weren't good enough in the first place, because I didn't answer them precisely enough. I'm just going to have a look through as well here to see if there's any others that I can put down. Yeah, just I think maybe the last one with the phone issue. Phones are, well, they're not new anymore, but they still remain a kind of point of conflict, if you will. And there's no doubt that some people will use them as a way of sort of establishing some sort of disruption that they haven't really thought through very, very much. I would say, again, the establishment of rules at the start, the phone doesn't work. But I would also say for that if you're saying, especially when you're teaching adults, look, if anybody's got a particular reason why they need to, please just let me know at the start of the class, and then it's fine. And then that tends to work, because if people do get a call that's something to do with their family back at home or with their work, and they will apologize profusely, dash out of the classroom, take the call as quickly as they can, and then come back in, and then nothing's been disrupted. That's absolutely fine. We do have to understand that in certain circumstances, people do have lives outside of the classroom. Obviously, that's not an issue for your average teenager unless they've got a very, very good reason for taking a phone call, but otherwise, no. The other thing I would say about phones is that, and this part of the point that somebody made about pronunciation here as well, or wanting to use it for other reasons, you may have a situation, and again, check with your school, but you may have a situation where you can say, okay, we put our phones away, there may be an exercise that we do or something that we're going to do. I will say you can all take your phones out at that point and use them for this particular exercise, and then put them away again. And I think people are okay with that. So I would say that's one that can work fairly well as well at times. And it's that idea of, we're in this together. I'm giving a little bit as well in order to compromise on something that might be important for you as well. Okay. Do we have any other questions? So I've got new comments coming up down here. Okay. Well, thank you, Josh. That's a really good question. Hang on, let me put that one up. How do you help a really shy person to relax and join in better during the lesson or after? I'll relate that to a slightly wider question, first of all, which is one of not exactly favoritism, but sometimes we all go for an easy life. If you've got tricky questions, tricky concept checking or something like that, there's the temptation to always go to the person that you know is going to answer well. And so that's clearly not always fair, because that person who may be a stronger student anyway gets more practice, gets more interaction than the other students do. And that's clearly not what you want to happen. On the other hand, you don't want to have the $64,000 question in a class, and at the same time say, pick on the shyest person who really doesn't want to be having to front up at that particular moment in the lesson. So I think you sort of pick and choose in a situation like that. The other thing, so maybe you'd let them answer a simpler question, where maybe a simpler, shorter one, give them confidence, and then gradually bring them in when they can say more. And it's something that I mention quite often in when I'm marking assignments as well, which is a concept called pyramiding. So it means that when you're doing exercises, it's not you at the middle and everything going out to the class and back to you. So it's not a constant back and forth. What it is instead, of course, is then you're getting classes into groups. So you're working in much smaller groups. And again, then you can pick and choose a little bit more wisely as to what the task is and what you want them to do. And of course, what's very difficult for some people, especially, intermediate and below, of addressing the entire class, they can talk to their peer group much more easily. And then when you're asking for them to report back to the class as a whole, they've already had the chance to rehearse what they're going to say a couple of times, so they feel much more confident about it, and then they can address the class. And again, that's part of inching somebody towards greater confidence in a wider group as well. So I would say those are ways of doing things. I would also say, though, there's definitely a bit of give and take with this, where you don't think that you drop them into the deep end and expect them to harden up. That's not going to work. So don't ask the tough questions. Don't ask the ones with a lengthier answer. Get them to do something simple. Get them to do more difficult stuff in the peer group first, then even pyramid it, by which I mean you go from a very small group, maybe just 2, then to 4, then to 8, then to the whole class or something like that. And so they get a chance to say it 2 or 3 times before they come out to address the whole group. So always keep an eye on those people, but don't let them be the only people you keep an eye on. Sometimes it's very easy. You've got maybe a couple of people that you think are going to be a handful. You focus on them. You've got a couple who are very shy. You focus on them, and there can be a lot of people who are kind of in the middle. They're not the shy ones. They're not the star performers. They're not a handful in terms of needing attention. Make sure that they get everything that they need as well. It's very, very easy to have people who kind of drop in the middle and then don't get the attention that they merit. And it's one reason as well why, when you put them in their groups or their small ones, you get out there and you monitor as well. It's the nicest thing you can do in a lesson, where you get a little bit of, not necessarily 1-to-1, but 1-to-2, 1-to-3 time, and you can actually listen to what somebody's saying, correct it. You've made a little correction, you've dropped it in there, and that's something that they will probably remember, because that was them. They said that, you corrected that. You heard that as an individual, so you get proper individual correction, and that really goes a long way. That goes a long way towards making you liked, respected, valued as a teacher. And then that's something that comes back to you in terms of the way that the students will then react to you in the next lesson. You're not just a figure at the front. You're somebody who's actually in there, mixing it with them on a much more personal basis. And I think things like that have a kind of long-term benefit in terms of classroom management, of really helping people to relax, because they can say something wrong, they know you'll be there to help them, but also getting the idea of you as an individual and not just the figure at the front of the class, which is what you want to avoid. Okay, I'm just going to show this. Sorry, I haven't read this one properly. I'm hoping then, Manshi, that I've answered that to a certain extent by saying that you don't drop them in the deep end, by making sure that they join in gradually, that they address their peers. They're sitting next to you. Assume they're sitting next to people who are their friends. So in that case, you put them in with their own peers, with the people they feel comfortable with. And so, yes, my only point about that was don't always give people like that too much attention, because you should not do it to the detriment of the wider class. But I hope I've more or less answered that. Okay. Any further questions for the moment? I don't know what time we're doing. Yeah, 50 minutes. I'm more than happy to stay here either up to an hour or past the hour. Okay, right. For young learners and teen learners, if some students distract the class off topic, do you have for regaining or redirecting the class back to the topic? My suggestion for that is don't let them take it off topic in the first place. And by that, I mean you deal with it quickly, and you deal with it without making too much of a song and dance about it. That idea of don't give people the idea that they've got too much attention in the first place. I think in terms of actually going off topic, so maybe you're not talking about misbehavior here, you're talking about it going on to something else. I think it's just a simple, polite, oh yeah, that's great. Not quite what we're talking about here. Can we try to stick on this, please? Just a simple kind of address it directly, so that you've made them aware that actually what they're doing is digressing from the central topic, and also making them aware that you're aware that they're digressing from the topic. So just a kind of slight internal discipline as to, yeah, get them in, get them on, keep them there. Ooh. Okay, I hope I've helped with that. Has anybody got any further questions at this point? I'm just going to allow it to have a little delay, because sometimes if you pop anything in. Oh, this is a good one. Thank you, Jim. Encouraging a shy student who may have attempted to participate on previous occasions. Again, sometimes a difficult one. I think I may have partially answered this one, because as I said, you tend to make it easy for them in the first place if you can. One other thing I would suggest about that is, obviously you've got the idea here that, as I said, about giving people easy things to answer, to give them encouragement in the first place. If you're giving somebody very, very easy questions to answer, picking them out because you know they're shy, and then you're still getting the wrong answer, you do at some point or other have to ask yourself, are they in the right class? And that can be something that can sometimes be a perfectly good conversation to have after a lesson as well. And occasionally you'll say to somebody, look, do you think you're at the right level? And the relief you'll find from a student will go, oh no, I didn't understand anything. Or I understand nothing, whatever it may be. And the relief that you can get from somebody, but for whatever reason, they've ended up in the wrong class. Maybe your school's incoming test was a multiple choice, and they just lucked out and got 70% when they should have got 40%. It could just be something as simple as that. So that's one thing that to have. If somebody's giving the wrong answers constantly and you're making it as simple as you can for them, have a word with them, see what they think. And sometimes they're dying to go down a class because they're just not, they know they're not at the races. So that can work as well here. Okay. Right. Just going to pop this one up. Thank you. I'm assuming your name is Kate. And if it is, thank you. That's a really good one. I think to chuck an extra question in there on top, if somebody, I'm assuming is if somebody is digressing from the topic, bring it back with a question, because of course a question demands a response, and a response demands attention, and so on from there. So I think that's a really good way of doing that. Okay. Okay. Again, I'm still leaving gaps. I'm going to pop this up, and if I get no further comments, I will wrap it up in about 15 seconds. But I'm still more than happy to take any questions if they're coming. The questions are, I really enjoy the questions, by the way. It makes me reflect as well, as I will after this seminar, and as we should after every lesson, after all. Okay. Nothing else being forthcoming. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure doing this, and I hope that I get to encounter you in further seminars in the future. I'm not sure when my next one is, sometime next month, I believe. Okay. Many thanks, and I'm going to stop the camera here, and then I'll lock out from there. But thank you again all for your attendance. It's been really, really enjoyable for me. Thank you.